January 25th, 1995. In a moment that defined the Premier League in the 90s, Eric Cantona leapt over an advertising board and kung fu kicked Crystal Palace fan Matthew Simmons in the chest. It had already been a tumultuous night for Cantona, having been sent off for kicking out at Crystal Palace's Richard Shaw. On his way to the tunnel, he was met with a torrent of abuse from Simmons, who had rushed down the stands to give King Eric a piece of his mind. So Cantona responded by giving the irate Palace fan a piece of his boot. This shocking incident at Selhurst Park generated immense media frenzy and analysis about Cantona's character, painting the Frenchman as both a villain and a troubled genius. At Croydon Court, he baffled journalists with his famous cryptic statement, "When seagulls follow the trawler, it is because they think sardines will be thrown into the sea." This enigmatic behaviour was quintessential Cantona, unpredictable, eccentric and mesmerising, cementing his status as one of football's true mavericks. But where did it all start? Born on May 24, 1966, Cantona's passion for football ignited during visits to the Stade Vélodrome with his father Albert to watch their beloved Olympique Marseille. Infamous as a cauldron for atmosphere, he was often transfixed watching the high-intensity football on display by Les Phocéens. However, it was a certain Johan Cruyff who truly left a lasting impression on Eric. On one particular visit to the Stade Vélodrome, Cruyff's Ajax beat Marseille 2-1 to the dismay of the home crowd. However, Eric had seen a player and style of football that would impact how he would view the game forever: total football. Unlike the attritional football often on display in the French leagues in the 70s, Ajax played the game with such beauty and fluidity, free-flowing football where Cruyff was able to express himself as a true artist of the game, an experience that altered young Eric's football brain chemistry forever. His playing career kicked off with Sports Olympique's Kai Lollet, initially as a goalkeeper like his father. However, the team's dominance often left him bored and frustrated. Eric was keen to get amongst the action of it all. Seeking a greater challenge, Cantona made his starting berth up front during a youth tournament in Cannes. His impact was immediate and immense, leading Kai Lollet to victory and earning himself the Player of the Tournament gong. Over 6 prolific years, Cantona's goal-scoring prowess and technical skill garnered attention across French footballing circles. This eventually led to an invitation to link up with Auxerre's esteemed youth academy. Although moving 500 miles away was daunting for his parents, they knew it was a chance of a lifetime for Eric. Under the mentorship of Guy Roux, Cantona's star continued to shine bright, dominating at the French Youth Cup and playing for the national team's under-17s. His talent and bravado made him a constant target for opposition players, having to withstand relentless brutality on the pitch. Physically, he was transforming into a formidable footballer, gaining the muscle needed to compete in the French leagues. However, Eric's greatest challenge was his own temperament. After an underwhelming first-team debut for Auxerre against Nantes in November 1983, manager Guy Roux advised Cantona to keep his focus whilst training with the reserves, assuring him his time would come, albeit to Eric's dismay. When Roux recalled him in March 1985, Cantona faced Cournon-le-Cendre, a tough team from the mining town of Auvergne. After getting battered all game, one particular tackle pushed him over the edge. Though his own retaliation didn't warrant a red card in the eyes of the referee, the defender was sent off. After the match, Cournon players confronted Cantona outside the dressing room. In the ensuing brawl, Cantona defended himself fiercely until Roux intervened. The manager then demanded all players be treated for injuries in the same room, with Cantona sitting among his battered opponents, as if nothing had happened. At 18, Eric was called up to national service, an experience that taught him some much-needed discipline. Over this time, he trained with the army throughout the week, then returned to Auxerre on weekends. Cantona soon became an integral asset for Auxerre, notably in their quest for UEFA Cup qualification. In a decisive match against Strasbourg, Auxerre needed a draw, but trailed 1-0 at half-time. In the second half, Eric smacked one in from range, securing the point needed for his team and solidifying his status as a rising star in French football. However, his form then dipped the following season, and he was loaned out to Martigues, a team fighting relegation. Cantona managed 4 goals in 15 appearances, becoming their top scorer and helping the team narrowly avoid the drop. Yet, his fiery temper surfaced again, leading to an aggressive altercation with a spectator during a French Cup match. Despite his disciplinary issues, Cantona's talent was undeniable. Roux recalled him to Auxerre and immediately offered him a long-term contract. With André Charmac leaving the club in 1985, Cantona seized his chance, scoring 17 goals and helping Auxerre secure European qualification. Cantona's electrifying performances that season led to a dream transfer to Marseille. However, his 3-year stint at the Stade Velodrome was far more turbulent than he might have imagined. On one occasion during his time at Marseille, he launched into a tirade against French national team manager Henri Michel, calling him one of the most incompetent managers in world football after being left out of a squad for a friendly. As a result, he received a year-long ban from the national team. Back at his club, Cantona's relationship with the tempestuous Marseille fans soon soured, and he was loaned to Montpellier for the 1989-90 season. Under future World Cup winning coach Aimé Jacquet, Cantona scored 10 goals in 33 appearances, but again couldn't control his temper. A scuffle with Jean-Claude Lemieux, where Cantona threw his boots at his teammates' face, led to his immediate sacking by Montpellier's chairman Loulou Nicolin. What followed was a nondescript spell at Nîmes, underpinned by a month ban for throwing the ball at a referee. At the French Football Federation disciplinary hearing, he systematically called each member of the committee an idiot, increasing his ban to 2 months. Incensed, Cantona retired from the national team, and on the advice of then France coach Michel Platini, as well as advisor Gerard Houllier, Cantona sought opportunities abroad, hoping to leave his baggage back in France. However, old habits die hard. Eric's first experience in England saw him take residence at Sheffield Wednesday. Cantona travelled up to Hillsborough to put pen to paper, but instead of signing, manager Trevor Francis insisted it was only to be a mere trial. Cantona was perplexed, later saying, "I thought I was there to sign, and after a week, they said I had to spend 1 more week on trial. At that time, I was one of the good French players playing for the national team. And then I was on trial with Sheffield Wednesday." Needless to say, Cantona was not impressed and made his availability known to other clubs in England. He quickly parted ways with Sheffield Wednesday and moved across Yorkshire to Leeds United. Under Howard Wilkinson, Leeds had risen to the top of the league in the 1991-92 season, but desperately needed more firepower to secure the title. In January 1992, Wilkinson met Cantona, and days later, Cantona was a Leeds player. His time at Leeds marked the birth of his cult status in English football. Fast to impress with his unique style of play, Eric slotted in alongside Rod Wallace and Lee Chapman, notably scoring a stunning solo effort against Chelsea, flicking the ball over Paul Elliott's head before volleying into the top corner. He went on to score 9 goals that season, shoring up the title for Leeds with Manchester United hot on their heels. Cantona had truly recovered his mojo and had found a league in which his talent and eccentricities were celebrated. After Cantona's France crashed out of Euro 92 in the group stages, Eric continued his scintillating form at the start of the 1992-93 season with a hat-trick against Liverpool in the Charity Shield, followed by another treble soon after against Spurs, the first hat-trick of the newly created Premier League. However, his relationship with Wilkinson took a nosedive after Cantona was substituted in a Champions League match against Rangers, getting dropped for the following game against QPR for storming down the tunnel. In November, Leeds were languishing in the bottom half of the table, and when Cantona was dropped once more, he responded by handing in a transfer request. Leeds did what they could to sell him to a club in Europe, but when their managing director Bill Fotherby called the Man United chairman, Martin Edwards, with an inquiry about Dennis Irwin's availability, somehow United flipped the script and ended up signing the Frenchman for a reported 1.2 million. However, only ended up paying 1 mil. Here starts the final stanza of his playing career, one which would be transformative and see Eric Cantona morph into King Eric. Under Alex Ferguson, Cantona found a manager who understood his Maverick tendencies. At that point in time, Ferguson needed Cantona and Cantona needed Ferguson. He became the missing piece in Ferguson's puzzle, helping United reclaim greatness. After an FA Cup win in 1990 and a European Cup Winners' Cup in 1991, United were poised for Premier League success. Cantona's impact was immediate, scoring 9 goals in 22 appearances, leading United to their first league title since 1967. The following season, Cantona continued to shine, scoring 25 goals in all competitions, including 2 penalties in a 4-0 FA Cup final win over Chelsea, securing the league and cup double for United. His enigmatic brilliance then saw him scoop the PFA Player of the Year award, receive a standing ovation from Spurs fans after a mesmerising performance in January 1994, and paved the way for an era of dominance at Old Trafford. At this point in his story, King Eric could do no wrong in the eyes of football lovers in England, with the possible exception of the Leeds faithful. However, the 1994-95 season will always be remembered for the absurd incident at Selhurst Park, where Cantona Kung Fu kicked a fan in the crowd. Vilified in the press and bombed out of the United squad for 8 months, Cantona was a Rizzler paper away from leaving the club, only for Ferguson to exhibit one of the best pieces of man management the game has ever seen. That season, United would eventually lose the title to Kenny Dalglish's Blackburn Rovers, but Ferguson was able to retain his talisman. The following season sits as one of the most iconic in Premier League history, as Manchester United, propelled by Cantona's 14 goals and Ferguson's mind games that led to Kevin Keegan's "I would love it" rant, managed to overturn a 12-point deficit and overtake Newcastle to win the title again, alongside another FA Cup victory. In what turned out to be his last season at United, and indeed professional football, Cantona was promoted to club captain following Steve Bruce's departure, leading the club to their 4th title in 5 years. Mavericks be Mavericks, and one standout moment came on December 21st, 1996, against Sunderland. In a routine 4-0 win at Old Trafford, Cantona scored a goal of pure genius, chipping the Sunderland goalkeeper and celebrating in the most nonchalant way, chest out and looking around at his 70,000 disciples at the Theatre of Dreams. At the peak of his powers, Cantona could have put in majestic performances for many years to come, but at the end of the season, despite only being 30 years old, he retired from professional football. Albeit he stepped back from his throne, King Eric would retain his crown forever. An icon and a legend, Eric Cantona was a true genius. Thanks so much for watching. Please do like, comment and share if you enjoyed this one, and stick around for the next video on the Football Documentary channel.